Hi, and welcome to Spaminar, the Society of Prop Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. I'm Jen McClure, the chair of SPAM's Education Committee and prop supervisor at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale and the Yale Repertory Theater. The Society of Prop Managers, known as SPAM, was formed in 1994 by a small group of prop professionals in the Midwest to address issues of common importance and to create parity with other production departments. Today, we are an association of 150 plus professional prop managers and educators from not-for-profit producing organizations, opera companies, and educational institutions. We've built an international communication and support network that shares resources, information, solutions, and techniques, as well as safety information, continuing education, and our stock. As with previous Spaminars, we're requesting pay what you can donations to help support this program and our annual grants for early prop career professionals. If you can afford to donate, links to donate will be in the chat, and we truly appreciate any help that you can give. We've enabled the live transcriptions for this webinar, so if you'd like to use them, click on the live transcript button on the bottom and then select show subtitle. Alternatively, you can click view full transcript to see it in the meeting side panel. I'm joined tonight by SPAM members Ben Holman and Patrick Drone to talk about how we achieve safe and reliable fire effects without the use of real flames. We'll each be sharing some things our theaters have created to achieve fire effects, as well as some great solutions that other SPAM members have shared. So please ask any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll circle back around to them at the end with our Q&A session. Okay, so now we're going to get started with introductions. Patrick, get us started.
Greetings all, I'm Patrick Drone, prop manager for the School of Music, Theater, and Dance at the University of Michigan. As Jen said, I've been there 11 years, been doing props for way longer than that. I look forward to doing this talk. One of the neat things about where I'm at is I actually do have to deal with multiple types of venues, including one that is a historic building. So I have learned a lot about the rules and regulations of what can be done. And I'm going to now pass off to Ben.
Good evening. My name is Ben Holman. I am the props director at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. It's my 31st year with the festival and my 25th as the props director. We're on a university campus, so we deal with a campus fire marshal and have multiple different venues. So we're constantly dealing with live flame effects and fake flame effects and that kind of stuff. So I look forward to having this conversation.
Fantastic. All right, so the other contributors that we have that sent us some information for tonight are Rachel Erickson, the properties director for Baltimore Center Stage, Aaron Ocampo, the associate prop supervisor at the Cleveland Playhouse, and Mara Tunnicliffe, the property supervisor for Syracuse Stage. Okay, so planning for fake flames. So Ben and Patrick, I'm gonna turn this over to you for a little bit to talk about what do you do in the beginning of a show where you know that you need some fake flame? What's your process like when you go through this?
I'll go ahead and start, Ben, and then you can chime in. Feel free to add too. First off, I have to consider which one of my 3 theaters I'm using. And also let me know if the sound is bad. I'm using a headset I'm not used to. I have one theater space that is 250 people. So everything's extremely close up. My second space is 900 people, but that is in a historic venue. So I can't use any actual flame, spark, not even cigarettes on stage because of the historic nature of that building. And then my last venue is 1,200 seats with a full balcony. So none of the audience is very close. So everything kind of has to be scaled up to look good on that stage. The things that I consider are which space it is, what scenery is around it, whether that fire or flame effect is built into a piece of scenery or whether it is out by itself like a campfire. I also take into consideration the fact that I am working with a completely student crew, and that student crew needs to be able to maintain and run that effect through the whole run of the show.
That's all really good, Patrick. The biggest thing that we in the last couple years, we've tried to just move away from live flame as much as possible for, safety reasons, reliability, all those kind of things. Also, we have a fairly new campus fire marshal. Our previous fire marshal was very lax in enforcing requirements and stuff, and let us kind of get away with a lot of things. And our new fire marshal is much less that way, which is good. And so we spend a lot of time talking to him when we do a live flame effect, about all the requirements and all that kind of stuff. So that as much as we can go to a fake flame effect, it just saves us the hassle of dealing with him coming to watch rehearsals and look at spacing and want to change blocking and change costumes and all those kind of things because of his safety concerns and things like that. So yeah, the biggest thing is actor safety and repeatability. We do have an outdoor venue, so wind. We have live flame torches, which we used for years. But our newer theater we built in 2016, the wind can blow through there and really take a live flame torch and make it into a very dangerous thing. So
Great. And maybe can you give us a little information before we start looking at some of the examples of things of what do you think about when you're planning the budget for these? Do you have to take into account if someone in your shop has experience with electrical wiring? Is some of this stuff just easy enough to look up a YouTube tutorial and kind of figure out? What planning do you do?
It depends upon whether I'm having a staff member work on it or whether I'm having a student work on it. Because after all, every 4 years, I get a new group of students. So we're starting off at that same beginning of the learning curve. So, which is actually the way I prefer to do it, because that way they get the knowledge and the understanding. So the things that I do to make items consistent is I've actually limited the voltage that we use in the shop. Everything either falls under 9 volts or under 12 volts, unless it is being controlled by literally a cable from running off stage, at which point we bump it up to the 110 and work with the lighting department. Most of it is geared though around making sure that it's a learning opportunity for the students.
I'd say we do, luckily, LED technology in the last couple of years has really made a lot of this so much easier. And a lot of the effects we're going to show tonight probably wouldn't have been possible in the way they are now without that technology. So we're constantly sort of adding to our arsenal. So we have a whole series of effects that we've done previously that when a director says, hey, I want a smoldering fire pit, or I want a torch or whatever, we now have a bunch of examples we can show them really early in the process, to say this is kind of the direction we can go, get early buy-in from them on the visual, and then make it look very specific for the needs of that particular show. So we sort of have collected and kept all of our fire stuff over the years. So budgetarily, during the design process, we get approval from the director so we can figure out cost-wise what we need to do to make that work. But luckily, a lot of the electronics are taken care of by some of the stuff you could just buy off the shelf from Amazon or other online retailers and stuff. So you don't need to figure out a lot of the electronics parts. If you can figure out how to wire a battery to a light bulb, you can probably make it work at this point.
That's great. Yeah, I'll chime in just a little bit. What's interesting about, so at my theater, we don't get to play with a lot of this stuff because a lot of these go to our electrics department. So in some theaters, depending on sort of the division of labor, things like this might wind up falling more to the electricians. So I hope we have some electricians there in the audience too, seeing kind of how to wire these up. But always it's a collaboration of, often props makes the fire and then electrics provides the lights or whatever that might be. But certainly being able to wire these things up and be able to provide them yourself is really wonderful. Okay, so we're going to move on here to our first intro. So Aaron Ocampo, who's the assistant prop supervisor at the Cleveland Playhouse, came up with this really smart electric match solution. So a lot of shows want you know, someone to strike a match and then light a candle. And while you can have an electric candle, that match lighting is always a tricky thing. So Erin made us a great tutorial that we'll be sure to share in the YouTube notes for this as well. But this is some close-up pictures from their tutorial. So this is what's called a pin cell battery. So these batteries are little, and they're used for like fishing lures and that kind of thing, really small things. And Patrick is going to show us afterwards too how sometimes there are light up arrow ends as well for when people are hunting, that they can attach these to their arrows to be able to find them. But what's wonderful is that we can get these great little batteries. So this little battery, the end, the little pin here on the end, is one side, and then the side of the battery is like the other connection. So what Erin points out here is that the end of this isn't really something that's solderable. The metal doesn't like solder. So what she did was added some wire around the end of this and wrapped it really tightly, and then was able to solder onto that wire to be able to connect the LED. So the LED is connected here on the right with the positive connected to the battery, and then the negative wire, it looks connected in this picture, but it's actually completely free. So this is a little flickering LED light. And then we bent the wire here up out of the way. And so then that initial part that got soldered gets covered with a piece of heat shrink tubing. And so that also helps keep that soldered end connected to the end of the pin cell battery. And this piece of heat shrink goes down, but doesn't completely go to the end of the negative end of the LED wire. So you can see with this little arrow that the LED wire is overhanging the heat shrink tubing just a little bit. But this heat shrink tubing helps kind of hold the LED wire away from the battery. So there's a little gap there, which is great. So then another piece of heat shrink tubing, you can use, you know, you don't have to use these fun colors for these. You can get white or black or that kind of thing too. So then another piece of heat shrink is put over the whole thing, over the LED wire, and a really small slit is cut in here to allow access to the negative end of the wire. And if you have to, you can even bend that wire back a little bit so it's not making permanent connection. And so then when that little end is pressed against the battery, the light lights up. So here we've got a great video of this light in action. Pretty fun. And from a couple feet away even, I mean, even in the video, it looks pretty darn convincing. So Patrick, why don't you talk us through what you did here for this how you kind of modified this end of this arrowhead.
This one is actually a completely just off of Amazon part. It happens to be an arrow nook that has a switch built into it. I will say that adding a little bit of red marker makes them glow the color a little bit better. Because the director was wanting them in rehearsal as early as possible. In fact, even before they moved to the theater, we went this route because it decreased the labor cost. And the great thing about these is you can actually, the same pin battery that is used in Erin's is what powers these, so that battery is replaceable. I can't wait though in the next few weeks to actually try Erin's and experiment some with it.
And what's nice too is that this end of this arrow kind of has a little bit of a flame shape to it too, right? So
Yep.
Yeah, a little bit of color on there could really make that pretty fun looking.
And scale wise, it works great for pulling it out of a pack of matches or a box of matches. I've got it sitting there with a box of matches and, you know, one of our normal just puff cigarettes that we occasionally use just for scale. And it's great because, you know, you don't have to worry about it happening to deal with a real match that you're putting out, which is actually why that box of matches has aluminum in it, because you have to go somewhere with that match after it's put out. But the arrow nooks just were much cleaner for us, and we were able to get them into rehearsal and get the actors used to working with them.
Great, thank you. And then, so tell us a little bit about this Zippo lighter that you modified here.
The Zippo was a project that was done by a student, and the goal was to make a Zippo that looked realistic from any one of our stages, but also had a replaceable battery and still had the traditional click of the Zippo opening. Because that was very important to the director. We were able to take the cotton out of the Zippo lighter. We ended up just getting, that's 2 flicker bulbs or flicker LEDs that have not been wired up for 12 volt, because you can buy them either straight LED or buy them with resistors for 12 volts already. We get them just bare LED, wire them together, and then that is a 3-volt battery. And then under my thumb, you see in the image, is just a momentary switch, the absolute smallest one we could find on Amazon. And because you're not breaking the spring, you still have that great click of the lighter opening and closing, which even in our 1,200 seat house, the directors want to hear that click.
What did you do to the bulbs here? Is that hot glue? Is it silicone? Is it a little bit of gel? What did you kind of do to color them?
It is actually, we went and coated them completely with silicone. And we mixed a little bit of universal tints to try and make them appear as a single flame, as opposed to having them be the double flame, or because it is 2 LEDs together. The one challenge we did have, though, is on a prototype that I made the mistake of building. I put the silicone on and then I closed the lid, and then promptly forgot that the silicone would stick to the lid. But it's a learning environment, even for myself.
And are these flicker LEDs, or
Yes.
are these just yellow?
They are a flicker LED. The one challenge, though, is especially when you put 2 together, they kind of flicker the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it gives a lot of bang for the buck. With the flicker effect itself, I think just a yellow LED or an orangish amber LED might be better, but it's fun to play around with.
We made one of these a couple of years ago too, and I think we used 1 red and 1 yellow light, so that they weren't flicker bulbs, but the difference of color was pretty helpful too. Very cool. Excellent. And then are the batteries just literally taped together? Not even yeah, it's super easy, right?
We soldered a piece of copper onto each wire so that there would be a bigger contact surface, but then they're literally every battery holder that I tried to find didn't fit into the Zippo. So we just discovered that wrapping them in LED or in electrical tape did just fine.
Great. So then here's a couple of just light modifications that our electrics department at Yale actually did. So they just used these little Christmas lights that, we've kind of all probably seen, and put, again, like Patrick just said, a little bit of silicone over the end of the bulb. So you can see here this silicone to kind of give mask the shape of the bulb. And then here they are in some candles that were getting put into some lanterns. And then you can see each of these just had a little battery pack with some AAA batteries that were put in here. And then they lived inside of our lanterns here, and they looked pretty great. Hold, please. Okay, so this was a very cool effect that Mara Tunnicliffe from Syracuse Stage shared with us. So these are these candles that you can get, these little candles with these fun flicker tips on them and a light that kind of shines on them. They like kind of pivot and sway, and they look kind of hokey like this, but when the light shines on them, they're like surprisingly convincing, which is very cool. But these ones specifically are made so that you twist them when you turn them on, and then they have a sensor in them that if you blow on them, they blow out. So they're made so that when you go to bed at night, I guess you can walk around and blow your candles out. But very cool for us that sensor already exists in these lights. So check out this wonderful video. And I kept the audio on because I wanted to hear her wonderful breath. So they twist these, and they have kind of the other part of the battery in the table. So they would get kind of twisted when they got turned on, and then be able to be blown out in the scene, which is just really wonderful. So that's a very fun thing that, again, exists already. No need needed. I think Adafruit might sell an air sensor that you could add to these, but again, the lights exist, so that's pretty great that you can just buy these. And then just some hot glue addition on the outside to make this look, because the candles themselves are skinny little taper candles. So being able to make these nice and big. So I think this was for their Christmas Carol that they did up there at Syracuse Stage. Okay, so Ben, tell us about this row of candles that you have.
So we the candle that we use tons of are called Luminara candles. And they're basically a single LED with a little piece of plastic that has a magnet on it. And the magnet sort of pulses on and off, and that creates sort of the moving flame effect. Our lighting designers love them. I get calls all the time after they've been here for a season, like, I'm doing a show with candles. Well, what are those candles that you use? And we own 1,000 of these things between tapers. We actually found the manufacturer in China and like cut a deal one summer and bought a crap ton of pillars and tapers, and we use them for everything. They're basically they run on 3 volts, so 2 AA's or 2 AAA's depending on the style of the candle. We figured out how to cut them down and stuff. We also wire them together. So this is one of our candle bombs. So this was like a Juliet's tomb thing, and instead of having like 25 candles to create a turn individually, we actually wired them all together with help of electrics to a switch. And so they could drop like 3 or 4 of these boards in front of the tomb, flick them on, and we'd get like, 40 or 50 candles, but they could get turned on really, really quickly. And on the shelf behind them, you could actually see there's some round ones from a different show. And we just most of the candles, most Luminar candles, the pillars are wax already. And so we just either drip additional wax or hot glue to create the drippy wax effect. And on the tapers, we've figured out how you can cut them down in size and just hide the battery somewhere else in your candle holder or whatever. And so we love these things, and they actually currently make, and at the end, if we have time, I have some actual physical objects I can show you. They actually finally make one that goes into a light socket. It's a C7 base. But last year when we did Romeo and Juliet, we actually found them. They're pricey still. They haven't come down in price. They're about $25 a candle. But we did 2 huge chandeliers with 18 candles per, and we're able to buy the Luminara candles for those as well. So they're awesome. This is not a commercial for Luminara candles, but if you want a really realistic looking candle, our fire marshal, actually, we were allowed to strike a match for a show to light a candle, but the candle could not be a real candle. So we actually used a Luminara candle. And one of his student assistants came to see the show and went back and reported to him that we actually lit a candle on stage. And he called me up and he was furious. And I was like, no, it's not. And so he had to come out to the shop, and I showed him what we were using, and he was actually really impressed. He's like, that does look like a real candle. Yeah.
Yeah, these are, again, the fact that these are like a wax base, the light that they come with as well is really great, because yeah, it makes the whole candle glow, it's so much more than like a piece of PVC pipe or something. So it gets that really beautiful actual flame glow too. Yeah, I've seen people when they see these up front, they say, oh, that little flicker is there the whole time, I'm gonna pay attention to it, and then it just like goes away when you're a couple feet away from it. And then just this when it lights, yeah, they're so convincing and really, really wonderful. Great. So Patrick, tell us a little bit about these light bulbs. So now they're making these light bulbs that have sort of this fun flicker pattern, and some of them, I don't know if this is the one that you use, but some of them even have, allegedly anyway, like sort of a patterned shell to help break up the thing.
Yep.
But what did you do here for kind of making these battery operated? Because normally these screw into a regular socket. So what did you kind of do to hack these?
one of the things that got me thinking about this was just realizing that very few LEDs take 120 volts. So I opted to cut apart one of these bulbs, and inside of it, there's generally two different circuits. One circuit board that has taken the 120 volts of your household circuit of the socket and bringing it down to whatever the usable voltage is for that LED light. For this light, it happened to be 7 volts. And thankfully, LEDs are pretty tough. And even though it was a 7-volt LED circuit, which to me was just a very odd number for them to be using, but we quickly realized that it could easily operate on 9 volts. So what we have done is we go in and we use the smaller version of this, which is a candelabra base. And that is what we build into our lanterns that we use on stage. So this was just a prototype that we wanted to see proof of concept that these circuit boards could run off of just a 9-volt battery.
And is this circuit board that we're seeing in your picture here what's inside of this, or is that something additional that you?
That is actually something additional that we now use when we're converting and turning the candelabra base of these flicker bulbs into like a kerosene lantern. Those only take 5 volts. And so what we end up doing is we take that circuit board, which is called a buck converter. Buck converters are awesome. What they give you the ability to do is you have the voltage, like in our case, it would be a 9-volt going into it, and then you can adjust it to the voltage that you need below 9 volts. And the great thing is, you know, the lower that voltage is, the actual longer that battery will last. So you'll end up with a flicker lantern that'll last a 2-week run easily. I've had it last an entire run of a show and run for the entire tech process. And then we only switched them out because I didn't want to get called over the weekend to replace the bulb if it went out. But it was all in this designing it so that we were using off-the-shelf parts that were easily obtainable, and also making the entire thing easy for students to work on so that they can figure out how does it function and give that look that we were going for.
And so when you're reducing the voltage there, how do you do that through this chip? Just because I'm a little unfamiliar with this, and maybe some other folks are too. Do you have to plug this chip into like a computer to
Nope.
do that, or is there some sort of dial or like
there is actually in the upper right hand corner of that circuit board, there is a potentiometer where you put a screwdriver onto it. You solder into the 4 points at the bottom. 2 of them are the in feed, 2 of them are the out feed to the LEDs. And you literally just dial it in to the voltage that you want. It actually has a few preset voltages, but I think it's such a great learning opportunity for the students to adjust it themselves that I make them pull out the multimeter and do the adjusting. You know, we even start with, okay, let's take the light bulb to the bandsaw, which if you ever want to just see an amazing moment, see a student taking a light bulb to a bandsaw and having them go, wait, can I really do this in life? And to create this experiment. And it works beautifully.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So then here's just a couple of other folks that have used these same flicker bulbs in things. So here's a video of Cleveland Playhouse. Again, Aaron shared with us this lantern here. And then Patrick, you had shared this video of this one. Was this like blue light for something in particular?
Actually, that was an off-the-shelf lantern that we bought a few years ago called an Old Brooklyn lantern. And when we originally saw them, my predecessor was like, great, we'll use these in all the shows. Then they showed up and they had that beautiful blue LED light coming from them. So they had sat in my warehouse for 5 years, a whole dozen of them, because I knew eventually we would get into doing something with them. And it wasn't until we came across these flicker bulbs at Home Depot that we went, wait, if we hack that, we can convert and actually make this a usable unit. And the cool part is the Old Brooklyn fake oil lanterns actually have a potentiometer built into them already, in which you can actually hack that into the 9-volt battery hookup so that you can actually dim it up and turn it down as if they're actually turning up the oil lantern or turning it down, even though an oil lantern doesn't actually flicker.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks. Okay, so then Ben, tell us a little bit about this torch. And I think similarly, you had done, you took another one of these bulbs too, but this kind of shows that repeating LED pattern on there. But tell us a little bit about what you did for this torch. Oh, Ben, you're muted.
Here we go. So the torches, we actually found an outdoor solar version of these that are already sort of battery powered. And we basically bought those, we took them apart, we removed the solar panel, and the 2 wires that normally go to the solar panel, we then created spades so we can plug a 12-volt wall charger in and charge these torches, charge these lights, and then added a switch to them. And we now have, we throw these in fake fires. We have like 4 or 5 different versions of the torch now. This is kind of a tar and feather version from a Big River. We have some really fancy ones with metal cages now that we use for a lot of our history plays for our Shakespeare theater and stuff. And we wrap them with a little bit of scrim to kind of break up sort of the white bulb shape. We've also done a little bit of painting on the bulbs and things like that. But we kind of skipped one step because after they came out with the light bulbs that went off 110 volts, these came out a year or 2 later, and they run off 12 volts. And they're now on Amazon. I think you buy them for about $10 or $12, the full torch, and then we just take them apart and pull the bulb out, and then add our charging cables to them and stuff. But
yeah, these are great. And it's really wonderful how much just, again, that little bit of scrim breakup really helps, kind of disguise the repetitive nature of the LEDs too, right?
yeah.
Great. What else do we have? Oh yeah. Okay. So Patrick, you had a couple, you shared this great class project that someone had done. Tell us a little bit about this.
This one is, again, it's a moment of using hot glue and LED lenses. It's using a 12-volt LED that is a flicker LED, and then we literally just put them into a quarter size glob of hot glue, and we let it cool down. We usually do that onto a piece of aluminum or a piece of brass so that it's easily, you can pop it up. That creates a lens for the skull project. This just happens to be a project that the students who are coming into my shop for the very first time, everyone builds a skull because it takes them through sculpture, woodworking, and some basic electrical work, which is fabulous for a freshman to do. But it's amazing to me how just a 9-volt battery, a 5mm LED, flicker LED, and a little bit of hot glue the size of a quarter makes this great, nice, big flicker effect that is sort of fun to see in a skull.
Yeah. And then do you wire those, is the control for them sort of back with like underneath, or is it in the back of the head, or do you turn them on and then put them in the eye sockets?
We actually have the wires coming out the back side. We solder up battery 9-volt battery holder onto it. And then just to turn it off, we have them unplug the battery. That's one of the things we can get away with it being a class project as opposed to something on stage. We don't have to worry about hiding a switch somewhere.
Yeah. Great. And then Mara from Syracuse Stage shared with us this very cool sort of charcoal pit here. So kind of show this fake charcoal on the top and removing the charcoal, and then kind of seeing again, there's two in there, two of those LED stacked on top of each other, but then that gives just a nice interior, you know, we're barely even seeing any of the bulb inside of there in this little fire pit. Great. Okay, so then this was another thing that Mara from Syracuse Stage shared. So again, here is kind of their hack of one of these light bulbs as well. So I think, I'm not sure whether this was a solar one or a regular one, but they had attached these other lights to it and then hooked up this USB cable. And then I think we're able to hook this up to just a battery pack, which is pretty interesting. That's my understanding of all of this anyway. And then this was able to go into these torches that they made. So then these torches had some plastic up here. I'm not sure if this is like Wonderflex or if this is just a you know bent sort of other heat form plastic. But then she kind of shows that the handle disguises the on-off switch so that that's able to be kind of hidden in with the flowers there. But again, the plastic really kind of grabs the color and brings it up through it. This is, you know, has a little bit of color, but that helps kind of elevate the light that we're seeing in there. So another good solution to a handheld torch. And then here was, again, something else from Syracuse Stage. And I think, Patrick, you had shared with us this light bulb. So I'm not sure whether this was maybe the light bulb, the base of the candelabra that you were talking about before.
Yep.
Yeah, but then, you know, so they use these same sort of type of bulbs, but just, again, adding some silicone. And Mara even said a little bit of food coloring you can use with the silicone. Sometimes silicone doesn't love water-based things, but I think sort of sandwiched in the layers, it can kind of work for this. But again, the color, adding some color onto this bulb and just a little bit of breakup and some irregular shape, then made these little candles on this tree that they had here. Okay, so Patrick, here you again. So now we're getting into the world of these fun silk fan fires. So I purposefully, as we show these videos, I left the audio on so that we can kind of hear the sound of the fans. But so tell us first, Patrick, about your can here.
First of all, this thing was a complete and total failure. And I love it for that. What we discovered, it was the director wanted to have a very small fire come out, but it wanted to have very big flames. They loved the idea of it having silk flames on it and all. But the problem is, in order to have those flames coming up, you have to have air getting in there. And so this, and I feel bad that I don't actually have a video of the successful one. But the problem we ran into was we had to create holes around the base for it to pull air in to be able to make the flames come up. I actually like the fact that we've included it here due to the fact that it was a complete and total failure. The LEDs on it were just, it was a Halloween decor that we took apart and we put in this coffee can and then ended up just drilling lots of holes around it to try and figure out how much airflow does it need. And then we adapted it actually to a much bigger can because no matter how many holes we put in it, it wasn't enough to get the airflow that we needed. And it was literally all about learning how much that silk needed air coming past it to do that effect.
So Ben, tell us about your one over here.
So this one was for Joan of Arc in some show. We burned her at the stake. And it's got a fairly large piece of silk. The biggest thing we find with a lot of the silk fires, a lot of the directors want really, really big. And there's a certain point where the fan, to blow the big piece of silk, the fan gets too loud. And then I don't want to make that much noise, but it's like, well, you got to have one or the other. So, uh, anyway, it's this piece of silk's about, I think, 9 inches wide. There's two pieces of silk, 9 inches wide by 12 inches tall, and there's a pretty beefy computer fan in there. And then there's actually 2 yellow and 1 blue LEDs shining on it. This one plugs in, but we've actually since created the same effect with a 12-volt battery pack. So we'd have to deal with cabling it for a different show.
Great. So then this is similarly was again something that Rachel Erickson from Baltimore Center Stage shared with us. So this here is a picture of kind of what these little fans that you could just get on Amazon, these little sort of Halloween cauldron fans kind of look like. So sometimes they have a colorful silk, sometimes it's a little bit more translucent. But yeah, I think the interesting thing is the addition of the blue LED is something that we don't always think about, but that little bit of sort of white, like it adds a little bit of whiteness in there that really kind of helps with that. So they basically took one of these, took it apart, and hid it inside of this little campfire here. So you can see kind of before it started that the silk was kind of tucked inside of there. And then they also showed us that they had kind of on the upstage side here that we can see they rewired it so that the on-off switch was somewhere that the actors could access it. So when this thing was brought out, then it could be easily turned on and off. Doesn't need to be turned off on or off with a remote control or anything. And so then here's sort of what it looks like in the light, in the regular light. So, it doesn't look like, so convincing, but when it's dark, it starts to get this, this really great colors in here. And the video is like really kind of convincing. And especially like the shine on things around it, I think are also one of the really great convincing things is like this flicker of the reflection of whatever you're getting next to you. So yeah, this was again Baltimore Center Stage's little campfire. Okay, so Patrick, you had done this sort of fireplace fire, and it sounded like you were using some sort of plastic or something, and I didn't totally understand what you were talking about. So tell us how you achieved this one.
So this has a couple interesting bits to it because we wanted the smaller photo to the right is the image that or from the audience's side. So we just wanted that glow of the ash and everything underneath of it, but we also wanted it to light up the actors just a little bit. And because I like using 12-volt to try and keep everything universal, this has got 12-volt LED tape. It's underneath the cosplay world has been so good to us. It's underneath a product called LED foam. It is a foam that you can get from Amazon, which is where we've got it from. It's a 1/4 inch thick. It's white in color, and then you can tone it to look like ash. But what it does is it actually is made to have light come through it. And it does just a beautiful job of that. This fireplace ended up actually getting hardwired in and controlled by our lighting department. And what we did was we've got the base of the coals lit up on one channel and one transformer. And then you see the lights that are actually shining up at the camera. Those helped illuminate the actors. And what those are is the flashing construction lights that a truck along the interstate would have mounted in its grill. We just used them. And in fact, a couple times before we've used the flicker unit also that those come with to create a really neat flame effect. But this time around, we just let the lighting team control it, and they were able to turn those on and actually illuminate the actors.
That's great. And yeah, very good point is that sometimes that they want the actors to be seen too. So is this like these red and yellow stripes that's underneath this plastic, or is that
Yep.
is that shining down from the top? So the
That
lights
is-
the lights are at the bottom.
Those lights are at the bottom. They're underneath that LED foam, and they are shining up through the foam. We were able to just sponge on a little bit of black and a little bit of gray paint, just so that when the lights were off, it would still read as ash. Because this was a show where the entire audience was seeing all of the stage all of the time, which just gives them ample opportunities to critique everything on set.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so here is a fire that we made at the David Giffen School of Drama. So for some reason, in the last couple of years, we've had a whole bunch of shows that have needed fires in trash cans. Everybody wants a trash can fire. I don't know if this is happening at everybody else's theater, but so we've done, you know, trash cans, these 55-gallon drums. We've done little metal trash cans. All kinds of things. But so our electrics department wired up this very cool contraption here. So this had a whole bunch of stuff inside of it to make this effect that we see over on the right. I don't have a video of it running, but so this had light and a little bit of fog. So we're kind of moving into some smoke effects now. So you can see in this picture, this round insert that was then able to be put inside of this can had some little pipes, and on each pipe it had a side light that was pointed towards the center, and then an up light here that kind of lit up to again light the actors' faces and project some different color stuff in here. So these ones kind of pointed towards the center were meant to light the smoke, and then these ones were coming up to light the actors. And then in the center of this, there's also some LED tape, as well as one of our little tiny foggers. So we have a couple of these tiny foggers that can be remotely controlled, and they have a battery pack. And so you can activate them from someone standing backstage. So that was kind of in the center, and that then created enough smoke to all stay contained inside of this unit. So a lot of mechanism in here to get this very cool look, but again, way safer than actually putting a fire into the trash can. Okay, Patrick, you've got this humidifier fire. Is this a different fire than the one that you had just shown us?
Yeah, it is. This one's sort of fun because, well, I totally stole the idea from Eric Hart. What it is this was for in the venue that I have that is a historic building. So we can't actually use smoke or fog machines. So, but what we did get approval to use was humidifiers, ultrasonic humidifiers. Because of the fact that we had a cord running out and this was a fire that was going to be inside a fireplace, we were able to hide the humidifiers inside the fireplace. And actually, funny enough, this is using those same construction lights during this test with its flashing unit. And it literally is just two off-the-shelf humidifiers that go into the same pipe. We discovered that one just wasn't enough because those, amazingly enough, you know, off-the-shelf humidifiers aren't designed to go through like 4 feet of pipe. So we ended up having to get a second one. I think the one change I would do is try and find an industrial version of one of those humidifiers as opposed to using just one that's commercially available. But it did a good job. The lights themselves were just all 12-volt LED. Again, it was actually the lights. I specifically chose the ones that were used in construction vehicles for this due to the fact that they would withstand the moisture that this fire effect would have on it. It just had to be inside the fireplace. At one point in time, they did turn down the lights a little bit when the fire was supposed to be going out some. But overall for the show, it did a really good job.
Great. All right, so we're coming into our last couple things here. So this also similar to the ultrasonic humidifier, like you just mentioned. This was also what Syracuse Stage used to make a stove that needed to look like it was overheating. So they had done some tests with putting one of these in a little vat of water, so you can kind of see up here, and it had some lights. I think on here, or these are the atomizers. And then here's kind of a view of it working. So this was kind of one of their initial tests of just kind of seeing how much this was gonna create, and then they wound up putting a top lid on this so that the effect would get forced forward in this view here. So this tiny one that I have down here in the bottom right is a view of the stove being used on stage. But again, using these nice little humidifiers instead of using, full dry ice or the big sort of theatrical foggers, being able to use these smaller things are sometimes just a little bit easier. Okay, and then last, I think, oh, this is Erin's. Erin might even be there in the chat. Erin's in tech, but I think she's in here listening. Oh, I see her. Hi. Are you able to tell us about this, or do you want me to go through what you had sent to me?
Can totally talk about it. We're at intermission, so I snuck out.
Amazing. So here's Erin to tell us about this coal scuttle that they had built.
Sure. This is for the play that goes wrong. So it's supposed to be like a huge explosion caused by a match hitting alcohol. So we did try a couple different things. We did try the Bosentech mini fogger, but it was just not extreme enough. So we basically wanted to mimic the effect of like a Chauvet geyser without cutting any holes, because the scuttle has to like move on and off stage. And here in Cleveland, we have an incredibly strict fire marshal, so we can't use any spark, any flame, anything like that. So basically, this is kind of like a little piece of PVC that is capped with like a shower dispenser. So that's packed with cornstarch and black holly powder. And then we ran a pneumatic tube to it, which is set to an air compressor backstage, which is at 80 PSI. So then inside is that tube, and there's also an Inky run by an RC4, so it's controlled by the board, and that is an uplight. So with the uplights and the powder and lighting kind of cheated and dimmed everything around it and put a down light on it. So I think it really reads well, and there's no risk.
Fantastic. Thanks. Wonderful.
Great job.
One more. Okay. And then Patrick, yours is this is our last example here.
Yep. This is using a lot of off-the-shelf parts. This is using one of those micro foggers. This is completely controlled by just an off-the-shelf Amazon remote. It's controlling the fog that's going out. It's also controlling the LEDs. For the LEDs, instead of using LED tape, this is the rings that you can buy. They're a lot of times called angel eyes, but it's the ring of LEDs that people who drive nicer cars than I have mounted around their headlights. And you can get them in all kinds of colors. This one, we happen to use them in red. We mounted them just underneath that LED foam. We were able to carve that foam to look like the coals of a grill. The director and the designer totally wanted a lobster, even though I've never seen lobster cooked this way. And it was great because what they could do is the stage management team would trigger the lights and trigger the smoke just before the lid would get lifted off, so that it would be completely full of that smoke. And then it would just pull off in this big waft of smoke. And suddenly there is Larry the lobster just hanging out, getting cooked. But it was just using a 12-volt battery from Amazon that are actually, again, made for the cosplay world. They're called talent cells. I use them for everything. You can get them in a couple different sizes. It's got both a 12-volt output and it's got a USB output. So for some effects, you can use it.
This, Patrick? Is that this?
Yep.
This part? Okay, that's the battery.
That's the battery. Next to it is the Amazon 4-channel remote that allowed us to control the fog machine that was mounted underneath the coals, and it allowed us to control the LEDs themselves. And everything is just a 12-volt system. We even had it set up so that we could plug a charger into the bottom side and recharge everything. It did great for the entire tech week. But it did a fabulous effect for, the initial cost of buying the fogger, I think, is the most expensive thing on there because it was about $200. But I honestly think there's probably ways that can be done nowadays with parts from toy trains and other different off-the-shelf parts that are now available. But that just happened to be the easiest one for us to use in that moment. And they really wanted that smoke to just billow out from underneath that lobster. So
Yeah.
it gave us the bang we needed for our buck.
Amazing. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to stop our slideshow.
Okay, and I have
So-
one thing to
Oh,
show.
yeah, please, Ben. Yeah.
So we had to do portable braziers. So these are big metal braziers. They now make battery powered atomizers. So you don't need any cords. So this is all from Amazon. It's a little flicker string of LED lights, which we put attached to the bottom of the top. And there's 2 atomizers in here just going crazy. They're rechargeable. So we've had the crew charge them between shows. But we used atomizers quite a bit early on when they first came out. And then people were like, we don't want to deal with the cord. And now they make battery powered ones. So you don't need to.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. So any tips for super tight budgets? So maybe Patrick and Ben, can you talk a little bit about like the sort of price levels of the things that you've been showing and talking about, and kind of what the difference is on the small things versus the fancy foggers?
A lot of it, I mean, it comes all across the board. One of the things that I didn't share is like, I've actually got adapters to use my screw gun batteries. So that way I'm using something that I've already got, because my entire shop is 12-volt Milwaukee's. So there is ways to save costs there. The other thing is to actually talk to the other departments and see if you can spread that cost across other areas. I know that one of the things that me and the new lighting supervisor is working on is they actually want to get more into the controlling of using wireless DMX. And I'm in full support of that as long as they're taking on the cost of it. There's a product kind of out there to fit every budget. It all comes down to though cost versus time. And the faster you have to have it done, the more you're going to spend. If you've got more time, then you can start with slightly more economical things. But a lot of times you're losing that in manpower. So as I said, I'm a big fan of the talent cell. I love the rings from the headlights because they're already red. You can buy them in all sorts of sizes. Generally, they're under $20 for a pair of them, which is fairly economical. I've also done fire effects though with picking up the free flashlights from Harbor Freight and putting gel on the front of them and busting them apart with a hammer and just using the circuit boards out of them. It took me a few trips to get enough circuit boards, but it worked. I try the sooner I know about the information, then the easier it is to budget for things.
Yeah, the torches, like these torches now run, $12 to $15. If you take 2 of these and throw them in a fire or something, you're going to get a decent fire effect. The atomizers that we used in these run about $12 or $15. So we're finding really cost-effective ways to do most of our fire effects. A lot of it's off-the-shelf Amazon stuff. and then we keep it all. And we'll pull the atomizers out of one thing and put them in something else, or the torch flame. We have tons of these just sitting around the shop now. If we're not using our torches, we got the bulbs, and someone just needed one we were doing a thing for Special Olympics at the Capitol a couple weeks ago, and they came out and grabbed 2 of these, threw them in some torches, and they were able to do a Special Olympics torch thing or whatever. We make all of our units so that all the component parts can come out and be reused in other things, to save cost that way too.
Great. So Katie asked, are we willing to put out a list of products? So yes, when this gets posted on YouTube, there will be a link in there to a PDF of all of the things that we talked about today, and also some other sources that we have. So yeah, we're going to share that resource list once this gets posted on YouTube. Anna, what about cigarettes? So we were talking earlier, and we had so much to share in 1 hour that we decided to leave cigarettes out of this, because we're probably going to do another spaminar about cigarettes and also flame proofing and that kind of thing. But the short answer is that there's not a ton of electric cigarettes right now available. The one best company that we had, the Actors cigarette by New Rule Effects, was wonderful and was rechargeable and looked fantastic. It was the one that we showed that was in the picture with Patrick's match. But since there was a bunch of government regulations about shipping vape supplies in the US, and so now we're not able to ship them because they're considered a vaping product because they use the same type of material inside of them. So we can't get them anymore. So now we've had to, tell our directors, if you're in a theater where you can smoke, we have herbal cigarette options, but now we often have to go to completely fake or, rig up some of these other things. I would be really interested in trying to figure out this light up match and add that out into a cigarette. I think there's some options there of trying to, but how do you light it? I don't know yet, but I think there's some stuff there. So I think we might be able to figure something out there. So Katie again asks, when the real flame is not an option, how do you approach your directors and your design teams that have their hearts set on real flame? I have opinions, but I want to hear yours first.
We often go the route of regulations. Like the fire marshal will not allow this, or costumes, the flame proofing that has to occur. Don't make it just about your department. So get other people backing you up. Fire marshal is really good. Costume designer who has fur on a costume, or wigs. Some of our outdoor Shakespeare shows, we have 3 foot long manes on people. And you don't want those to your live flame. So get as many people behind you as you can. And also, there are so many great options out there now that the audience is probably not going to know the difference. And you're also doing a theatrical performance. So it doesn't have to be real flame. You don't need that danger of real flame. I think there's really good options out there that I think you can back it up with some really good, it's we can make it look this good with no real flame. Most of the time, they'll go with you.
Yeah, the same is true here. I mean, I am actually thankful to have OSHA on my campus. And if I'm getting a lot of pushback on something that doesn't really need to be live flame or doesn't need to be, then I actually write to our OSHA representatives on campus to go, hey, they're wanting to do this, and doesn't exactly seem safe to me. They will write me back and say, you're just not allowed. Then I'm not the one saying no. And it's coming from above me, and it's actually coming from outside of the theater department or our control. And thankfully I've got a very strong and good relationship with them. So they trust us a lot when we say, hey, it's great, because when I go to them with an effect and show them how I'm being safe, they trust us enough to go, oh yeah, that seems to work. After you've got a prototype ready, we'll drop by and see it. But making sure that no isn't just coming from you as an individual, but is coming from you as either an entire production department or from outside of the production department.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of it is kind of showing a proof of concept and showing, hey, look how good this can look. You know, Ben
Yep.
talked a little bit about, you know, fooling the hearing about a live candle, and actually our friends who made the campfire, Rachel from Baltimore Center Stage, had shared with us that the fire marshal had been in the audience one night when they came to see it, and like the fire came out and they like got out of their seat and went to run backstage to be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then found out that it was actually just the fake thing that they had made. So it's really convincing, and is convincing even the people that do this for real. Karen shared, here in Minneapolis, if we have larger flame effects, the fire marshal requires us to have a fire department monitor watching each show at a cost several $100s a performance, which makes the cost prohibitive. So they can have fire, but they need to do other regulation things. So yeah, there's some regulation things like that too. So, but again, all of these things are very different depending on where you are. So you might need to look into your fire regulations of like what the jurisdiction is. Some folks will say, you know, have fire marshals come and do a walkthrough, and you may have heard the term AHJ and wondered what that is. So AHJ is the authority having jurisdiction, which is kind of, again, the fire marshal. So they basically have the authority to come in and say, no, you can't do this. And they can shut your show down for your scenery not being flame proofed, or for you doing something with live flames. So it's just not worth the safety risk, truthfully. And yeah, so if you're getting people that are pushing back on you, again, get other people to get behind you and stand up for that. And I think most folks are, a lot of theaters now are starting to be more aware of safety. You know, COVID sort of brought COVID regulations and safety regulations up. And so now I think the like safety officer position is becoming a more standard thing in a lot of theaters. So hopefully that person can help get behind you as well. All right, any other questions from anybody? Give it a couple seconds. No, okay, great. So wonderful. So I'm going to close this out now. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And I hope you all found this very fun and informative. So stay tuned to your email and our social media for more Spaminars that'll be coming soon. If you're interested in joining the SPAM team and are a working prop manager in a nonprofit theater, opera company, or children's theater, or if you're an educator who teaches prop classes, please visit our website or click the link in the chat to fill out our membership form. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and we'll put all those links in the chat. Spaminars are produced by the Society of Prop Managers, with special thanks to SPAM members Patrick Drone, Freed, Ben Homan, Stacy Horn-Harper, Nikki Kulas, Amy Peter, Sarah Pugh, Karen Robbie Vance, and Helen Stratakis, and myself. So thanks again for watching. And once again, please keep your suggestions for future Spaminars coming. You'll be followed up with a survey about what you want to see next. So we want to know what you want to learn about. So we'll see you next time, everybody. Prop on.
Bye, thanks for coming.